Hi, I'm Peter Onuf. I'm the AAS-Mellon Distinguished Scholar in Residence here at the Antiquarian Society for the year 2017, 2018. In retirement, I had determined I wasn't going to do any more research. Then offered the fellowship to be here with the brilliant young scholars and the wonderful staff at the Antiquarian Society. I had to come up with a research project. So I decided to focus my efforts and my attention on Isaiah Thomas, and it turned out to be a happy decision for me because, of course, the resources on the founder of the Antiquarian Society are unparalleled at his society, but he turns out to be an extraordinarily interesting man. In many ways, his career illuminates Thomas Jefferson's career. This may be just providential, or it may be that I'm forcing the comparison, but I am thinking seriously about the connections between the great idea man of the Revolution, Jefferson credited as the author of the Declaration of Independence, for the great enlightened ideas on which this nation is founded, and Isaiah Thomas, whose great mission in life was to memorialize the role printers had paid in making the revolution, and that print would continue to make in the ongoing history of the American Republic. Many of their ideas resonate with each other. That's one of the things I've happily discovered in my work on Isaiah Thomas this year. What I would say about Thomas's private and public life is that they stand in an interesting tension with each other. In his private life, I think Thomas is fairly typical of being an upwardly mobile, aspiring printer-publisher who becomes the biggest publisher in America by some accounts in the 1790s. He flooded the region in print. He had enormous success, accumulated great wealth for somebody of such a modest background. And there's a tension between that upwardly mobile, aspiring gentleman, Isaiah Thomas, who did not have a classical education, who could not have passed for gentry in provincial days, but in the American Antiquarian Society created a community of people dedicated to the reconstruction of American history through collecting and analyzing data of all sorts, from print sources, in which he was a specialist, to the Cabinet of Curiosities, or museum, in which material objects that illuminated the history of not only Anglo-Americans, but Native Americans and other European peoples in America and the world. This ambitious effort to understand the world and America's place in it. The people who were invited to join the society represented some of the leading lights, both intellectually and politically, of the entire country. And they included my man, Thomas Jefferson, another fortuitous connection for me. This idea of strengthening the attachments or the bonds of union was central to the enterprise, not as a flag-waving idea, that is, America the Great, first and foremost, but rather America as exemplifying the future of the entire civilized world. But that future could not be secured if Americans did not preserve and perpetuate their knowledge of the past. In fact, they had to escape the cycles of history, that inevitable decline into despotism that characterized traditional classical notions of history, and to imagine history progressively unfolding through the generations. That could only happen if every rising generation would stand on the shoulders of its predecessor, and those shoulders would not metaphorically exist if the evidence of the imprint that previous generations had made were not preserved. What remained as the central purpose of the Antiquarian Society was to sustain Thomas's commitment to the collection of print, and nothing was too modest or humble to collect. This omnivorous collection of everything, from the most precious document, and manuscripts were collected as well, and the most precious old book. Thomas and the Society had some really old and precious books. to the most worthless handbill or newspaper, the most ephemeral product. Everything was fair game for the collector. What Thomas and his fellow collectors or fellow antiquarians could not do was to make use of the great resource they were creating. Bridging that gap between 1812, when the society was founded, and today, when grateful users are so glad that those materials are there, was an ongoing commitment to collection. I would guess that not every collector knew exactly why he or she were collecting, what the point of it all was. And even when Thomas established the society, new members asked him, what exactly is the point of this society? And Thomas offered this bold vision of a comprehensive people's history, a people's history for the world. It was stirring, it was patriotic, people signed up, but they still didn't know exactly what the point of it was. And that has been the historic mission of the society, is to justify that original collecting impulse and perhaps to honor Thomas's original vision of what it was all about so that we can better understand our history and our prospects in the future.